Hi, I'm Jim Brett, President and CEO of the New England Council. Thanks for tuning in to this month's episode of Inside the Corner Office, where we catch up with the leaders of some of our region's most well-respected businesses and organizations to learn more about their career paths and about the institutions they lead. This month, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Elizabeth Chilton, the President of the University of New Hampshire, the Granite State's flagship public university. President Chilton just marked her one-year anniversary leading UNH, and I'm thrilled she could join me today to share more about her career journey and update us on the great work underway at UNH. President Chilton, thanks for taking the time to join me today. I know it's a very busy time as students return to the campus for the fall semester, but I think it's particularly conversational, timely, given the unique challenges facing the higher ed community. Yes, so absolutely. With that, we always start the conversation getting to know our guests and their career journey. So let's start there. You bring a very, very unique background to your role, having begun your professional career as an anthropologist. What sparked your interest in anthropology? And can you tell us a little more about your experience in that field?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for inviting me to join you today. It's good to see you again. Always happy to talk about UNH. Still super excited to have joined the Granite State and to speak with you today. So, yeah, archaeology. So I started college as a math major. And I did it because I was good at the quantitative types of fields. And I didn't have a better idea. And I came home from college and at Christmas vacation, and my father said, "How is the math major going?" And I said, "I'm a little bored. I'm not sure it's for me." And he said, "Well, why don't you round out your education and take something, an elective like anthropology?" And I remember distinctly saying, "What's anthropology?" And he said, "Anthropos, the study of man. How can you get a college degree and not know what anthropology is?" Now, granted, he did not have the opportunity to go to college himself, having served in the Second World War, and he was living vicariously through me. And so I did take an anthropology course and then came home declaring I was going to be an anthropologist. And I think he may have had second thoughts about having made that suggestion, but I think it turned out okay.
Yeah, it sure has. You've had significant roles at several prestigious institutions over the course of your career, including Harvard and UMass Amherst here in New England, and then Washington State University. What prompted your transition from teaching and research to administrative and leadership roles?
Yeah. Well, within anthropology, I settled on the subfield of archaeology, and my specialty is the archaeology of pre-colonial Native American societies in New England specifically. And so most of my excavations have been in the state of Massachusetts and in New York State in particular. And, once I became a full professor and got tenure, that's when your colleagues start asking you to take on more of the service work. And I became a department chair at UMass Amherst, where I was serving as a faculty member, and really discovered that I loved sort of moving beyond my own teaching, my own students, my own research, but helping the other faculty and the students, most importantly, advance their careers and their lives. And I really enjoyed working with other groups of people to advance the institutions. And, really, I appreciate that you referred to these as prestigious institutions. I do want to point out, though, except for my short 5-year hiatus at Harvard, I have only been in public institutions from kindergarten through my PhD and through most of my career. And that's really purposeful because public education has really served me well and my family and my siblings very well. And so it meant a lot for me to be able to give back.
I understand that you were a first generation college student, and as you just mentioned, at a public university. I think it was University of Albany. And so how does your own experience affect the way you approach your your role at UNH and your priorities there as a leader?
Yeah. My parents had 5 children, and we're all still very close with each other. And even though my parents did not have the opportunity to go to college themselves, they were adamant that all 5 of us have an opportunity for some kind of post-high school secondary education. And all 5 of us, let's see, 4 of us went on in education ourselves, either K through 12 or in higher ed. My one sister went on in nursing and pharmacy. 2 of us have PhDs and 2 of us have masters, and the other a nursing degree. And so it just became very important. But I do have to say, my first year of college was very difficult because as a first generation college student, I went to, my first year was actually at a private liberal arts college, very, very selective liberal arts college. And I felt that I didn't belong because I didn't know what the secret codes were, what the dress code was. I remember thinking when a faculty member put their office hours on their syllabus, it meant that that was when you were not supposed to disturb them. I didn't realize their office hours were when you were supposed to go seek them out. And one of my faculty members actually dropped my grade because she said I never came to her office hours. And that's when I discovered that that was an expectation. So in terms of, your question is how did that influence both why I went on in higher ed, but how I lead, what are my priorities? I think about accessibility a lot. I think about, we have quite a few first generation students here, and even if students are not first generation, demystifying, making education about mutual support and mentoring, not a bar you have to reach or not achieving some kind of elite status, but broadening your horizons and making that a lifelong engagement. And so I think that's really how it's influenced me.
Mm. You just marked your 1 year anniversary at UNH as the president in July. As you reflect on that first year, what has been some of the highlights? Well, more importantly, what has been some of the biggest challenges?
When you really come to a new place, in this case, a new state, even though I should mention one of my sisters raised her 4 boys here in New Hampshire, and my nephew graduated from UNH a while back. He thinks it's really crazy that his auntie is now the president of his alma mater. But you know, even though I was familiar with New Hampshire, becoming a Granite Stater, understanding another institution, as long as I've been in higher ed, every institution is different. And so it's that proverbial trying to get a drink of water out of a fire hydrant, trying to learn the people, trying to understand the programs, the acronyms that people use, really demystifying, being that freshman in college all over again, right? Constant learning. And that's exciting for me. Otherwise, I would not have chosen this career in life. I always like to be learning. Some of the challenges are what people will know well of. There's a national questioning about the value of a college education. Is college worth it? That is what families and students are asking themselves. And in fact, this past year, when we accepted a student to UNH, if they decided not to come, our number one competitor was no college at all. And to me, that's really disturbing because we love for them to come to UNH, but if they're not going to come to UNH, I want them to find their pathway in life somewhere. And we can point to all the long-term benefits of a college education. Even 2 years of college has both economic and social success outcomes, even healthcare outcomes over the course of one's life. But, those statistics are not helpful when a family is just simply trying to decide how they're going to support themselves and whether or not college is going to be affordable. So those are the biggest challenges, and those are national challenges. UNH is not immune to those, but nor are we, an outlier in the sense that this was a question we were facing at Washington State. It's a question that all of the universities across the country are facing. And so, the challenge is to as a university leader, work with my team to make sure that students understand what financial aid is available to them. Most of our students receive some form of financial aid. Make
Mhm.
sure students understand what that is rather than just looking at the so-called sticker price and saying, I guess I'm not going to apply. Really work with us to see how affordable it really can be. Try to keep our costs down as absolutely as much as possible. And then make sure that when students come here, we're helping them get through their programs in a timely fashion. We have a really good 4 and 6 year graduation rate and a really good, excellent job placement rate. Those are all really critically important for students to see, college and UNH in particular as a pathway for themselves.
What percentage of that student population is from New Hampshire? How many of them are from New England? And do you have any international students?
Yeah, we do. We have a very small percentage of international students. We have about 50% of our students come from New Hampshire, and then the other 50% come from New England. I think 35% or so um, come from Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is a big draw for UNH. And those out-of-state students, first of all, we accept all in-state students who meet our qualifications for admission. We have an 85% acceptance rate. So we are not a super selective, and that's on purpose. We're trying to be accessible to people who we feel could come here and be successful, right? We don't want to accept someone who we think is going to fail out in a year
Mhm.
because that's not going to help them. So those students who we feel could be successful here, we accept. The out-of-state students are important for the state of New Hampshire because a large portion of those stay and live and work in New Hampshire. In fact, we are the number one importer, if you will, of new talent and new residents to New Hampshire. And with a relatively small state and a somewhat aging population, it's important that we think about, who are going to be the next doctors and teachers and business owners, and we feel like that's an important value that we bring to the state.
Outside of the office, I understand that you're very passionate about singing, and you're a member of a local choir. How did you get interested, needless to say, in singing? And more importantly, have you found that local choir to join since moving to the great state, New Hampshire?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was fortunate that in my elementary school, music was very, very strong. And so from the third grade, all students were essentially automatically in the third and fourth grade choir, and then the fifth and sixth grade choir. And then after that, it was optional. But that was kind of like my people, some people joined a sports team, some
Mm-hmm.
people were cheerleaders, some people were in the chemistry club, whatever it was, but I joined the choir. And what I have sung in choirs literally since the third grade in one way or another. I find that when I move to a new place, it helps me connect to community members that I don't work with on the day to day, and I feel like I'm a true member of the community. So I did join a community chorus, the Portsmouth Pro Musica. And I've sung in a few concerts with them, and we're going to be doing another one this fall. And for me, it's like some people, well, I do yoga also, but it's
Mm-hmm.
that way of getting me to think about something totally different, use a different part of my brain, and really, singing. And one of my former conductors long ago said, having a good choir requires that you listen louder than you sing. And for me, that's a great metaphor for leadership
Yeah.
because, you really have to, maybe just about life, you really should always be listening louder than you're speaking or you're singing. And so working together, that group work to make something beautiful is just something I need in my life.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's shift gears and talk more about the incredible institution that you lead.
Mhm.
One of the first things that you have undertaken as president of UNH was to embark on that strategic planning process called UNH 2030. With the new plan being, I think, released this fall, can you just tell us a little more about that process and some of the priorities being considered?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I arrived, I found out that the previous strategic plan was being sunset in May of 2025. And so I immediately got to work with across campus with a really robust and engaged process to really identify, where do we as an institution want to be in 2030? To me, 2030 sounds like science fiction, but that's 5 years from now.
Right.
Where do we want to be? We know that there are fewer people of college-going ages because of demographics, and we can't go back in time and ask those folks to have more babies 20 years ago, and we're not going to change the demographic decline. And we know that there is this questioning of the value of higher education. And so, given those are the things we cannot change, well, I hope that we can change hearts and minds about the value of college education. But, where do we want to be? Rather than being victims of things that we don't have control over, how do we want to position ourselves? And so the group found and identified, and I worked very closely with them, four strategic priorities. One is to be a first choice destination for more students across New England and beyond. Second, to be known for distinctive areas of interdisciplinary research. We are a research university, so what are those four things that if you asked anyone in New Hampshire, they would be able to tell you this is what UNH is known for? Third, to really focus on well-being and belonging for our students. How do we make this a place they don't just want to come and study, but they want to come and live here and be a part of our campus community, and the same for our faculty and staff. And then finally, and I should have really started with this one, how do we both strengthen our impact on the state of New Hampshire, but also demonstrate that impact? So I believe we already have a very strong impact, but sometimes we don't get those stories out. We don't shout them loud enough. One of my colleagues, the vice president for marketing, said we did a brand study a few years back. And when interviewed folks at UNH, if you ask them, how would you describe UNH to someone who doesn't know anything about us? One of the most common things they said was that it's a hidden gem. And she said, we're a hidden gem is the worst marketing slogan that she's ever heard. And so, how do we go from being a hidden gem to just recognized as a gem and an asset to the state of New Hampshire? How do we position ourselves and open our doors even more than we're doing now to make sure that it's clear that we're here for New Hampshire? So, those are the four strategic buckets, but a strategic plan for me is the start of something. This is our roadmap. And then how do we implement it in a way that we're making good on the goals that we set out for ourselves? So this coming year will really be about setting up those implementation groups and really measuring, are we doing what we said we want to do, and how do we know, and how do we measure it?
Well, UNH is a gem to the economy of New Hampshire. Talk about the university's impact in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really because of the size of the university, it's the largest of the public universities in the state of New Hampshire and employs quite a few people. And of course, we all live and work. And UNH has a combined economic impact of more than 1.3 billion the last time we did an economic study in New Hampshire. I mentioned that we are one of the largest employers and importers of talent into the state. And as a research university, we brought in 250 million, or this past year, 250 million in federal research. And that's similar annually to what we bring in our research portfolio. And that in and of itself has an economic impact of more than 5 million in just 1 year because we employ people in the state. Our research has an impact on business and industry and creates workforce for our business and industry partners as well. So, specifically areas like um, biomanufacturing, the space economy, sustainability, forestry and coastal resiliency. These are key areas for the state's economic growth, and we have very highly ranked programs that are really preparing the next generation of workers to enter these fields.
You know, I know that UNH is very proud of the designation as a R1 research university, as you should be. Can you just share more about the federally funded research being conducted on campus, and more importantly, the impact that will have not only just in New England, but beyond?
Absolutely. Well, yes, we're proud of that designation as a research one or very highest research university by the National Science Foundation. And the recognition is important, of course, but it is really about making good on our mission, connecting deeply to student success. One thing I wanted to mention is that when I was at SUNY Albany, one of the reasons why I became drawn to archaeology and anthropology is that being at a research university, as a student, you get to work alongside your faculty in the creation of new knowledge. You're not just receiving new knowledge, sitting in the classroom, listening to the sage on the stage, so to speak, but you are in the field, you're in the lab, you're in the maker spaces, you're in the archives, whatever it is, you're creating new knowledge. And to me, that was so exciting and what really drew me into academia. And so that's an important part of our being an R1. We attract really top-notch faculty who are top in their field, as well as graduate students who want to study with these faculty members. But our undergraduate students get to take part in that mission as well. UNH is a land grant institution, but we're also a sea grant and a space grant institution, which means that our research goes from the depths of the ocean floor and ocean mapping to the frontiers of outer space. That's really exciting to me. I mean, I knew of UNH, but I did not know that we were a land, sea, and space grant institution until I really started looking into coming back here and serving in this role.
Uh, one issue that seems to be in the news almost daily of late is the shortage of healthcare workers, particularly in primary care, mental health roles. So, to help meet the workforce demand, UNH launched a new School of Nursing just a few months ago, and I understand the university has already had several nursing programs. But can you tell us more about the decision to bring them together into one school, and how this new offering will benefit both students and the community?
Yeah. I mean, as you point out, this decision to really pull in and focus on healthcare, particularly in primary care and mental health roles, it's really comes at a critical time for New Hampshire. As you point out, we have a significant shortage of nurses and increasing demand for highly trained healthcare professionals. So the idea is that the School of Nursing will play a vital role in addressing those challenges by expanding access to nursing education, strengthening clinical partnerships, preparing practice-ready graduates who are equipped to serve communities across the state, particularly in rural and underserved areas. This fall, we have approximately 800 students enrolled in 10 academic programs in the new nursing school. Things like family nursing practice, primary care, adult gerontology, really taking a close look at where the needs are. And by having a school that focuses on those, you can make more than the sum of the parts, if you will. You can really plant a flag and really demonstrate to healthcare partners that we are open for business, that we mean business, and really emphasize this as part of our strategic priorities.
Given the New England Council's focus on policy and legislation, we always like to wrap up these conversations talking a little bit about policy priorities and then how decisions made by our policymakers are impacting our region. So let's start on the state level. The latest New Hampshire state budget makes cuts to education funding. How are those cuts impacting UNH, and what steps is the university taking in response?
Well, no doubt we had a challenging budget year at the state level resulted in a reduction of $12 million as compared to last year's budget, just for this coming year. And, like every nonprofit, we have to match our revenues coming in to the costs that we are anticipating as we build our budget for this current fiscal year. So earlier this month, we made the difficult decision to eliminate several positions. 13 of those were unfilled, which means we just did not fill them. People had left or retired. But we did part ways with 23 employees and reduce the hours of another 10 employees. We did so with a focus on preserving student academic experience. And my leadership team and I have sought to really refocus our resources in those areas. We can't affect our student experience. So we did things like scaling back some professional development for our employees, which is, not ideal, but right now we have to focus on the things that affect students most directly. We shortened some building hours, some of the dining hall hours, we consolidated travel, printing services, things that we thought would not as directly affect our students. But at the same time, with the demographic decline, we are getting smaller. And so we're really focusing on how do we right size ourselves for what we anticipate. And this is where that strategic plan comes in. The state appropriation is critically important to us. However, we are a highly tuition dependent institution, and our net tuition is a much larger proportion of our operating budget. And so how do we make sure our students can afford to come here, still want to come here, and that we are making good on our promise to give them that high quality academic experience?
Was there any talk about eliminating some programs?
For us, we are going through a process now where the first thing we're doing is making sure we're being as efficient as possible in the programs that we have. How many sections of certain classes are we offering? Can we reduce the use of part-timers in some areas, and can faculty take on more? The closing of academic programs, in my mind, would be the very last step you would take. But of course, if you're seeing that over time, I was at a previous institution where we took a look at some programs and we just saw that there was just not demand. There weren't jobs also for students coming out. And of course, we will look at programs like that. We do actually close majors, dozens of them every year. We don't make a big splash about it, but we always take a look at, are we utilizing our academic programs to our best advantage for the students?
Yeah. We talked earlier about some of the incredible research being conducted at UNH with the support of federal research funding, which now seems to be on the chopping block in Washington. Can you talk a little more about the impact of federal research funding cuts and how the higher education community is working to prevent such cuts?
Yeah. Well, I've been talking a lot about our research mission. We were founded to provide research in the engineering and agricultural arts for the state of New Hampshire. And that is our mission. For its training of workforce, it's research for the public good. And as I mentioned, a lot of students come here to take part in that research and learn those skills, not just through a class, but through hands-on learning. So it is concerning to us. We're committed to maintaining our status as a Research One institution. And while we're seeing some slowing and curtailing of research funding in some areas, it still is coming through. We still are very proud of our partnership with NOAA, with NASA, with the DoD. We're also working with our business and industry partners to find ways to collaborate and advocate. We want to make sure we're getting the word out about the impact of our research. I've been glad to host representatives from our congressional delegation to campus to help them understand the impacts of our research, to put them in the best position to advocate for us as well. Just last week, we had staff on campus visiting several sites to see the connection between university research and the state's economy. So it's really about understanding the priorities of the new administration, promoting our expertise in these areas, making sure we're being clear about the impact to any curtailment of research funding. And then hopefully our allies and supporters will also advocate, because it isn't, when I advocate for UNH, of course, it seems very self-serving, right? Of
Right.
course, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for our students in the state. But what's really important is being able to identify, if this funding is lost, what will the impact be on New Hampshire? For our ocean mapping center, for our sustainable fisheries, for our space tech hub, for advanced manufacturing, being able to articulate what it would mean to lose federal funding for some of these really important research engines for the state. I think getting that word out is really the approach we're taking.
Yeah. Well, President Chilton, I want to thank you for joining me today. I wish you and the entire UNH community a great school year. And thank you for your incredible leadership of the university during these, needless to say, challenging times. And to those of you who tuned in, as always, I hope you enjoyed this conversation and the opportunity to learn more about UNH. I know that I did. And be sure to tune in next month when we'll catch up with a leader of one of New England's leading healthcare companies, Eli Lilly. So we thank you, and we hope you have a great day.